Hello, and thank you for joining us for this webinar Wednesday. My name is Sharon, and I'm with SIPA, your Colorado Government Authority, helping you get more information and services online. In today's webinar, we will learn about generative AI opportunities and risks for organizations from Mark Campbell and Ginny Mulder at EVOTEK. Before we get started, please go ahead and turn on captioning if you need or desire, and note that during this webinar, you are muted. If you have questions or would like to communicate with the presenters at any point during the webinar, please use the chat box or the Q&A feature. We will unmute everyone at the end for any remaining questions, and they'll probably answer a lot of those questions there at the end rather than during. We will not have any poll questions this time because we've got a jam-packed, awesome presentation for you. We do have a post-webinar survey though, and we really appreciate your feedback if you could answer those brief 3 questions that we'll send out at the end. Please join me in welcoming Mark and Ginny from EVOTEK. We appreciate their time and look forward to what they have to share. Also on the call is SIPA's Sales and Marketing Director, Beth Justice. So if you have any questions for us, please let us know. Thank you all again for joining us today. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark and Ginny.
Well, hey, I really appreciate you inviting us to the show today, Sharon. Ginny and I are pretty excited about speaking with you guys about a number of topics, all dealing with AI. By way of introduction, I'll give you like a quick overview of EVOTEK and what we do. By the way, I am the best sales guy you'll ever talk to because I got absolutely nothing for sale. I am just here to present information. However, should you feel compelled to buy stuff from EVOTEK, please do. We'd appreciate it. We provide advisory services, architecture, strategic sourcing, and engineering all around enterprise IT. We do quite a bit in the emerging tech space, which includes AI, which is how I spend most of my day. And I thought I would begin by just kind of laying some foundational concepts here about how Gen AI works. So we're going to do a quick walkthrough. For some of you that have your doctorate in convolutional neural networks, this will be very boring and very rudimentary. But for others, we've certainly heard a lot about it in the news. We've heard a lot about it from friends. There's a lot of FUD out there. So let's kind of take a peek under the hood and let's find out how generative AI works. So the first thing we're going to do, let's start with code. Everything in tech starts with code. Now, this is just simple Python code. We're going to walk through. I only have about 9 pages of this. So we're going to walk. Okay, hang on. We're not doing that. That's not how we're going to look under the code of AI. What we're going to use is a textbook that's tried and true. You guys have probably seen it. Really a good explanation of AI. This is Green Eggs and Ham by a Dr. Seuss. I think he's a computer science doctorate out of Princeton. But he wrote this book several years ago. Some of you have read it. But an interesting phenomena about green eggs and ham is green eggs and ham only has about 34 words in it. And they're kind of put together in different ways. As a kid, you loved that repetition. You always knew the word green was followed by the word ham, and it rhymed, and great pictures and all of that stuff. But what we're going to do is we're going to take all 34 of those words and we're going to write them on matchbooks. Okay, and the guy that came up with this was a gentleman named David Corney, so credit goes to him. I didn't invent this. He's the one that noticed this pattern, but it's a terrific tutorial on how AI works. And we're going to have one matchbox called start. Now, these are all the words that begin a sentence. And so we cut them out of the book and we really tick off our child who says, "Why did you destroy my beautiful book, my nighttime read?" And we're going to put all these into the matchbox. We're going to repeat that with all of the other words that are in green eggs and ham. So after there's a lot of different types of words that are after that definite article. The word green is always followed by the word eggs and can be followed by a number of different words. But all we're doing here, apart from destroying a book, is we are just looking at what is the next word that comes after. In AI terms, this technique is called a transformer, not the robot type or whatever, but this is a transformer, a rather simplified transformer. And then all we have to do is we'll pick a word that starts a sentence. So in this case, and. We'll then look in the and box and we'll pick a word that comes after and, in this case, I. And then we'll just keep repeating this until we get a whole sentence. Now, it turns out this is a sentence really made from little cutout pieces of paper from Green Eggs and Ham. And it says, "And I do so like them. Here they are so good, you may like them with a tree." Now, in the English language, this is not a terribly well put together sentence, but you get the idea that it generated this based off the patterns that were in the little papers and the little matchbooks of what comes after what. So you can kind of see that this little teeny example that we've run in AI terms is kind of like a stripped down midget version of what OpenAI has in ChatGPT. Now there's some very key differences between Green Eggs and Ham and ChatGPT. We've got one set of matchboxes, or in AI terms, what we call a model, and we only have 35 matchboxes, or what in AI we call parameters. Now, by comparison, compare that to the latest version, GPT-4 Turbo, that was trained not on the books of Green Eggs and Ham, but it was trained on all of the information that it could siphon up from the internet up through April 2023. Now, that resulted in 8 different models, each with 220 billion parameters each. So if you're super good at math, you'll realize that that's about 1.7 trillion parameters. That's an awful lot of matchbooks. But that's how big ChatGPT is compared to our little book. So you can imagine that instead of that funky sentence that we joined before, that ChatGPT is going to generate sentences that are much more nuanced. They rely a little bit on context. They understand that if you say a Shakespearean sonnet, it knows the contextual definition of sonnet and the style of Shakespearean. So you get the idea how complex it is. And I know you guys have all been out there playing with ChatGPT, and now there are several thousand large language models, LLMs. Now you kind of understand that word large in that, right? That's quite a that's quite an undertaking. And we are now seeing this applied in all sorts of areas of business, software applications, fun and games, but it really is changing the technical landscape just about across the board. Now, okay, so we've got large language models, whether it's ChatGPT or Green Eggs and Ham, or one that we built on very, very select data. So what the heck do you do with that? I'm going to give you some examples of some products you may or may not have heard of that are a little bit outside the ChatGPT realm, doing some different types of things. So the first product is from a company called Glean, and this is a turnkey enterprise genius. What you do is you install their AI. You then give it permission to go read some of your stuff. Now, some of your stuff could be Outlook, could be your Salesforce, could be your SharePoint, could be your Slack channels, could be your internal documentations, your run book, your designs. Again, you need to go ahead and give it permissions to do all of this, and that's up to your risk appetite, what you give it access to. But one of the interesting things is when it learns that information, it doesn't just learn the information, it learns the permissions that go along with it. So for instance, if you were to give it access to your Slack channel or your internal chat or Outlook, it would very quickly learn who reports to who talks to who. And so I know one of our particular customers that uses Glean, after connecting it to Outlook, they realized their employees were using Glean more than their internal org chart because Glean was more accurate. Glean had stuff in it from emails going back and forth that before it was announced to the company. So things like title changes, or someone got married and changed their last name, or someone transferred from this group to another group, or there was a new hire, or what have you. It's learning that from email, not from an org chart. As a result, their HR department quit publishing an org chart and basically said, ask Glean. Glean was added to their Slack channel as one of their employees. So you could just ask Glean and it would tell you things. Now, there's some interesting things that you could do. You could ask it things like, well, what are our quarterly goals? and it would have to fill in the context that says, what do you mean our? Do you mean our companies? Do you mean your team? Do you mean your department? Or do you mean you personally? So it will go through kind of some inference trying to figure out the context of that. But if you were to say, so, okay, so who does Sharon report to? Oh, Sharon reports to so-and-so. Oh, really? Well, what was Sharon's salary last year? Remember, we pulled that permissioning in when we learned about Sharon. It would go ahead and say, yeah, I don't think you really have permission for that. Unless, of course, you're the head of HR, in which case it would say, oh, well, it's $19 million, same as last year. So that's kind of the idea of pulling that information and creating this internal genius. Now, we do have customers using this, depending upon what information they give Glean access to. They're then able to ask questions like, is the billing system built on a 3-tier J2EE architecture? Well, yes, in fact, it is. Here are the design specs and the team that's in charge of that. You could also ask questions. What's the dress code for this upcoming sales kickoff? Well, that's business casual or what have you, because it's pulling all this information out. Again, we have another customer that has used this and has replaced their frontline help desk. Again, the goal here is not necessarily to replace headcount, but certainly to free the headcount you already have to doing more valuable work than answering questions about dress code and so forth. So anyway, one example here. You can see that you can kind of drill down, get nice artifacts out of that. So another example, this is more maybe on the development side. So remember earlier we took a green eggs and ham book and we cut it up into tiny little pieces. And I mentioned that in the real world, ChatGPT used as much of the internet as it could get its hands on. Um, in the real world, inside your business, your department, your organization, were you to go about building your own large language model to accomplish a business function, or maybe even to make your own search engine, you're going to have to pull in training data, hopefully more than just green eggs and ham, and going and getting that data, which is probably spread all over the globe, might be spread all over the state, might be in different products. It might be, up in the cloud. It might be in your own private data store. That's an awful lot of work. Well, it turns out there's a company called MindsDB that is super smart. And one of the things that it will do is it will go ahead and once you give it permission, it'll go ahead and connect to data sources throughout your enterprise. And then when you're getting ready to train your model, it's going to go ahead and make sure that it's pulling in data that's relevant to the goal you're trying to accomplish. And interestingly enough, as your AI model is running out in the field, it might be learning things that, well, no one cares about this, but everyone's asking about that. That can be fed back into your data store. So there's kind of this circular thing. Now, I know that's more on the development side of things, but up until a couple of years ago, building AI models was quite arduous. And getting them trained was a very tedious task. It required a lot of highly trained individuals. Well, as you can probably guess, if you went out on the street today and tried to hire an AI guru, they're kind of in hot demand. So it's going to be a bidding war. Tools like this are helping to simplify that. What if we took AI and had it help us build AI? Seems like a very circular type thing, but there are companies out there that are doing this. Let's look at another example. If you were to build a large language model, it turns out that current security tools, what are now commonly being called feature-based security platforms, they don't really do anything for AI. AI is such a different animal. It's subject to different types of attacks that frankly existing security models really don't cover them very well. There are some new companies that are emerging. One company is DeepKeep. We were introduced to them right after they came out of stealth. Product was brand new, had that new AI smell to it, and we were able to get a peek under the hood of it. Now, one of the things that DeepKeep does is it watches the entire development of AI. Believe it or not, there are nefarious people out there that when you train your data, they're trying to sneak nefarious data in, or maybe delete some information they don't want your model trained on. And the reason this is so serious right now. Most companies, I don't know, I'll pick an example. Let's say an airline. Most companies put a ton of security around their website, their flight reservation system, their frequent flyer programs, their baggage handling. They protect all the stuff that's out there running the company because, well, after all, it's running the company. However, all of the training environments and development environments where that stuff was built, those are secure, but that's not where the attention is. With AI, it turns out that's flipped around a little bit. Your development environments have all of the code. Those little matchboxes with the little names in them, then of course they don't really use matchboxes, but in our analogy, those are all in your development and test environments, which traditionally have a little more lax security on them. Well, that's the crown jewels. If I can get in and mess around with your matchboxes and slips of paper, I can maybe get your model to train to do something that I want it to do, which is probably not what you want it to do. And so protecting that training data from what is now being called data poisoning, that's a whole new attack surface. So DeepKeep has come out and they'll go from all the way from training all the way to when your models are running in production, and they'll make sure that they are nice and safe and running exactly how you want. Now, here's another bizarre product. It's called Patronus, and it's a guardian. So what it does is it guards your AI. So whereas DeepHeap kind of secures it, right, and make sure bad folks don't go in, this makes sure that your models are behaving nicely. There are terms in AI like temperature. Temperature, you can think about it as how predictable and formal your model is. So if you're giving legal advice, you want the temperature to be very, very low. There's not a lot of variability in it. It's like Perry Mason or Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am. Very black and white, very dry. However, if you crank the temperature up, let's say you've got a vacation site and you want to describe how awesome the beaches are and what a fun time it is at spring break. That temperature you probably want to crank up so that the words get a little more creative, a little more flowery, let's say. And you can imagine if you get those two mixed up, that's not so good. The other one, and you can see it on this screenshot here, is toxicity. In most cases, you want the toxicity of your AI model's output to be very low. You don't want it to, be, giving inflammatory comments or whatever. There's one flavor of toxicity that we're looking at right now. It's called off-brand. I'll give you an example. A company, I won't say names, had a financial services smart bot out there in their website's chat. So you can ask it questions like, how do I sell stock? What's the difference between a 401k and a Roth? Yeah, it's all terrific stuff. But a user said, I've got a bump on my elbow. And since the underlying model was based on ChatGPT, it has lots of information besides financial. And it very kindly said, well, could be cancer. Well, why is a financial service company giving, medical prognosis out there? This opens up a whole can of liability. And the term for that is off-brand. So you can start measuring whether your models are off-brand. Okay, so you guys get the idea. There's a lot of things going on more than just say, Chat GPT writing Shakespearean sonnets or what have you. But unfortunately, right now, the landscape is changing so fast, it's growing so quickly, it's very hard to keep your arms, let alone your mind, around what the AI landscape looks like. So I'm going to throw some facts and figures out there. There's no quiz at the end of this. You don't have to remember these, but let me tell you something that's kind of interesting. Right now, this is as of Q2 2024, so the quarter we're in. This is rather current information. The AI market right now is at a clip of about $197 billion. Now, to compare that to this time in 2021, that's more than double. So if you're doubling roughly every 3 years, that's a really high CAGR if you're a statistician. But let me put this in comparison. So right now, the AI market is as big as about 11 NFLs. It's about half the size of Apple. It's 3 times the size of IBM and 4 times the size of Cisco. So this is no longer an interesting side market. Well, isn't that cute? Oh, look, it can do this. Oh, I made a picture of a duck wearing a cowboy hat. Isn't that really cool? We're kind of a bit beyond that, and it's growing rapidly. Right now, 77% of US companies are planning to use AI or are already using it. Now, again, just comparing that to a year ago, that was 32%. So you can see that about twice as many companies are using it now. The predictions are, of course, that within about a year and a half, that number is going to be as close to 100% as you can measure. To put this in perspective, in the venture world, those venture capitalists out there that are investing in startups and, two girls with a PowerPoint coming out of Stanford, they're investing in those companies. So in perspective, 27 billion went into AI, specifically generative AI products like we just demoed with the Matchbox. That is 1/4 of all venture investment in the world is going into AI. So we think we've got a lot now. Hang on, there's more on the way. This is an interesting stat. It measured countries and what percentage of the population was using generative AI on a daily basis. And the winner was India at 73%. The US is at 45%. But I mean, if you think about that, if the US is rough and tough 300 million people, that means about 150 million people a year are using generative AI. And you saw that these numbers are rapidly growing. It's going to get to a point, we believe, really soon where you won't even know that you're using Gen AI. If you're using an application, it will just have generative AI in it. And so these numbers will quickly asymptotically approach 100%. So let me give you an example of that. For those of you that lived through the dot-com era, we used to have this word called e-commerce, electronic commerce. Now e-commerce is known as commerce. Unless you go to the farmer's market, there's very little commerce that's going on that is not electronic. We believe that same pattern is happening with generative AI. If you take a look at those startups that we mentioned, there's a brilliant company out there called CB Insights. I'm not here to sell any of their reports or anything like that, but they were tracking the top 100 markets of AI products. You can see some examples up there like use in gaming or fashion and retail, what have you. But keep in mind, within each of those segments, there are these sub-segments with other products in it. There are literally tens of thousands of products out there using generative AI today. So we have heard about some companies that said generative AI, it's a little fuzzy, it's a little foggy. We don't want our users and our employees using it until we know that it's safe and we can control it. But honestly, with this number of products out there, you can't go through and just say, well, let me blacklist OpenAI.com because we don't know how that's going. Let me put that on the disallowed list. Good luck. Very soon, everything from Southwest Airlines website to chat groups, they're all going to have embedded AI. In fact, you've heard a lot probably about Google Bard and Microsoft Bing, where they now have generative AI built right into them. And they're just search engines. So, I mean, imagine that. With all these products out there, where do you start? And this brings us kind of to the crux of the subject that we wanted to discuss today. How exactly, for my organization, my company, my team, how do I build a roadmap? Where do I begin? Where do I go next? What's the low-hanging fruit? And how do we tackle that? So we're going to go through a very simple to implement, very rudimentary, but also based on good research, an easy technique for you to roadmap how to go through things. Okay. So going back to folks like Peter Drucker or Deming or some of the fathers of process, and for all you PMI folks out there, big salute out to you guys. You're going to recognize a lot of this material here. So there's 4 levels. Whenever we do corporate planning, we have the corporate, the top level. We have strategic, we have tactical, and we have operational that respectively tackle the why why exactly are we doing this? Why are we in the airline industry and not the luggage industry? What is it that we do? What do we need? What's going to change? The who is on the tactical level, and the how. How exactly do we go about doing this? So there are 4 different levels. They all fit together into your overall organization and your processes and your objectives and goals. It turns out generative AI is really disrupting these bottom 3. So the existential questions at the corporate level, they'll still tend to be existential questions at the corporate level. However, the strategic, tactical, and operational levels are really being shook up by generative AI, and in 2 different ways. One is on the positive side, the opportunities that it opens up, new objectives, new products, new customers, new customer experiences, new workflows, new applications. A lot of things can be done on the positive side. On the negative side, we mentioned earlier some of the new risks this is opening up your company to. And so in a perfect world and with infinite budget, infinite headcount, and infinite time, we go fix all of the risks and then we go reap all of the opportunities. But it turns out that's not the world we live in. And so we're going to have to come up with a technique that exploits a little opportunity and mitigates a little risk. And we're going to do this in a 4-stage process. This is very Drucker-like, of identifying what the opportunities and risks are, analyzing them, breaking them into phases. What do we do now? What do we do later? And then actually going and doing it. And then we're going to repeat that cycle. So let's start at the identify phase. And when we go to identify these risks and opportunities, one of the downsides is we mentioned AI is changing so quickly right now. These opportunities and risks are constantly changing. Right now, this is as of last month. These are the top 12 opportunities broken down into that strategic, tactical, and operational that we're seeing our customers going after right now. On the risk side, these are the biggest risks our customers are facing. Now, I want to point the very first risk out: non-adoption. So if you say, well, generative AI, this is a whole can of worms, and it's a can that's changing really quickly. We don't necessarily have the best regulations out there governing this. We don't have best practices. All of these products, Mark just mentioned 4 products. I hadn't heard of any of them. So I just don't even want to touch it. I want to point out that by not adopting generative AI, that's a risk in and of itself, because your competitors are, or are very likely to be doing that. At some point, you're going to be eclipsed. Again, I'll use the parallel with the .com era. When the internet hit, a lot of people, hey, look, we don't know how this is going to work. I don't know if a credit card transaction over the internet is even legal, let alone if it can be trusted. So I'm not going to do it. But you can imagine those companies soon got eclipsed by companies now that are household names like Google and Amazon. That is a very similar type of disruption that we're seeing right now. So I do want to point that out. I also want to point out that not all of these are technical. Some companies are going to have to train their employees. You know how like we have a curriculum every year that talks about, hey, this is a phishing attack, don't click on it. And this is a hostile work environment, don't do this. We have those training every year. We're expecting to see another piece added in there about AI. This is what you can use it for. This is what you couldn't use it for. This is how you detect if you're getting biased results back. These are sites that you shouldn't even touch with a 10-foot pole. Also, policies. Most of our companies have acceptable use policies for, let's say, cell phones or company laptops. Those are also going to have to be updated. So that's a very non-techie type thing that from a strategic point of view, that's going to have to be addressed. So I want to show you where the 4 products that we mentioned earlier, where they fit in. If it seemed like they kind of weren't unrelated, that was kind of intentional. We kind of wanted to do a shotgun of some different things. I picked the tactical level, and I just went and got some products that were very illustrative of some of the different things that are out there. Okay, so let's pretend that we sat down and we went through. In our example that we're going to be using, we've come up with 12 opportunities and 12 risks. Could you come up with 8? Yes, you probably could. Could you come up with 135? You could, but that's a little boiling the ocean. We found that 12, we call them the daring dozen and the dirty dozen. That seems to be about the right size of a survey of opportunities and risks out there. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and analyze these. So we've got these opportunities, we've got these risks. Okay, not all of these are created equal. Some of them are very, germane to our business and what's going on, and some of them, frankly, are not. So we're going to take a look at the impact. Let's pretend that we built the most perfect customer experience using AI. How important is that? And we're not going to go into a big scientific thing. It's just, red light, green light, kind of analysis, thumbs up, thumbs down, or I just really don't know. We're going to go through each of these very quickly. There'll probably be a team that you would pull together to sit down and know both the technical and the business side of things. What is the impact these are going to have on our business today? We don't have to predict 5 years down the road, but just today. Then we're going to talk about the feasibility. Okay, yeah, this would be a huge impact to us. We don't have anybody here that knows that. We don't even know a company that actually even does that for a living. So that may not be a good initial target. Other ones are going to be, oh yeah, internal search engine. Yeah, we went to this brilliant speaker on a webinar put on by SIPA, and he said this product called Glean, bada boom, bada bing, it's out of the box, turnkey. That's easy peasy. So that feasibility is really just graded into, again, red light, green light, easy, hard, or this is intractable. I don't even know how we're going to do it. So very, very simple, very rapid technique of measuring each of these opportunities and risks. What we're then going to do, we're going to take those green greens and we're going to put them into a bucket and we're going to say, why don't we do those now? These are high impact and they seem to be pretty easy. Let's go ahead and do those. Anything with the red on it, we're not even going to take a look at. In the future, we might take a look at those green yellows and yellow greens, and who knows, if we're really making good progress, we might even get into the yellow yellows. But for right now, all we're going to talk about are 3. Again, this is an example, but this is very indicative of what we're seeing within our customer base. Hey, how do I discover what AI my company's even using? Turns out there are products out there, and many of you probably have some of these installed. If you remember products, they used to be called CASBs. I won't mention any product names, but if you've got something that detects what SaaS services your company is using, it's highly likely you do. A lot of regulation out there, especially government regulation, does require that you be able to inventory that. It turns out those products are now making an adaptation to where they can discover what AI products, specifically generative AI products, you're using. So you may already have this in-house. So that could be a risk easily mitigated. Proprietary AI, this is building your own AI internally. Again, could be as simple as a turnkey solution, could be a development effort. But for our example here, they said that's going to be of high impact and should be fairly easy to do. Data leakage. I do want to talk about this. When you use a product like ChatGPT and you type in a prompt that says, can you write a letter to a customer talking about how we are going to discontinue service to them because of their bad credit rating, and we may even take up litigation. And can you craft that up? Because that seems like an awkward letter for me. Boom, ChatGPT writes that all up. Now, despite promises to the contrary, many LLMs in their user agreements, they're very fuzzy about what happens to that prompt data. Is that going to be used to train the next version of the LLM? In which case, someone could ask, hey, has so-and-so ever been sued? And it would say, well, yes, in fact, here's a scathing letter that was sent to them, and it was for this, this, and this. Because it would just learn those, as in our funky green eggs and ham example, those would just be other slips of paper in other matchboxes. So having that proprietary data leak out through use of LLMs, that is a very real concern today. We believe in the future there's going to be regulations put around to protect this. There'll be tools to help this. There are some tools hitting the market today. We mentioned Patronus earlier. Patronus will make a suggestion and say, listen, there is what is now being called enterprise PII. Some people would probably just call it IP. Hey, there's some sensitive information in the prompt you're sending out. Why don't I go ahead and replace it? And we'll call the company XYZ and let's put that out there and then let's use it. So data leakage is a big one. I just wanted to dive into those. Those may not be your green greens, but they're fairly typical of what we're seeing today. We would then go ahead and phase them. Well, let's start on the AI use discovery today. I've got a team, they're already using a tool that has this capability. Let's just get that going right now. Next, we'll tackle this. The data leakage we think is going to take a little bit longer, but we'll tackle that one next. So this is just, again, broad project planning. Then we're going to move into the final phase, implementing it. We typically recommend doing an assessment phase. If you're a software development, this is akin to the requirements phase. Let's assess this. What tools are out there? I mentioned that these markets are changing very rapidly. And maybe you've got an advisor, like a company called EVOTEK, that is able to come in and say, you know what, there's a new product out there that does this so much better. We think for AI use discovery, you should use product XYZ, let's just say. And then you would go ahead and develop and deploy those solutions. Okay, that is great and terrific. That assessment phase, there are a couple of key aspects that we would recommend. This is we, meaning EVOTEK, would recommend, as opposed to we, the industry, on doing that, that assessment. So for risks, you're trying to quantify what the impact of this risk is and what the mitigation steps might be, as an example. Okay, so now we've talked about this 4-phase roadmap. At the end of implementation, we do want to swing back to identify, and we're not going to use the list we had before and just pick the next green yellows or yellow greens. We're going to go back and we're going to do another listing of use cases. I mentioned earlier that the industry changing very rapidly. Some of these, like maybe data leakage, there'll be regulations to protect, and so well, we hope those become kind of a non-entity in the future. There's going to be other, on the risk side, there's going to be other attacks that come out. Didn't even know that was possible. Okay, yeah, well, that's one that goes on the risk list now. So we recommend starting from kind of a blank slate when going back through it. So putting it all together, make a list of opportunities and risks. We go ahead and analyze them, red, yellow, green, for impact and feasibility. Boom. We then grab the highest impact for the most feasibility, and we start on those first. And after they're rolled out, we repeat that process. Okay, I'm going to take a breath, drink a little bit of Fresca, and let's open this up. You can go ahead and use chat. You can raise your hand on the video, but up to you folks. I hope we've got a ton of questions.
All right, I'm working on getting everyone unmuted, but feel free to throw those in the chat already if you want to. Fantastic information. Thank you, Mark.
Well, let me throw a question out to the audience here. Have you ever seen AI presented in terms of Dr. Seuss? Is that novel, or is that, yeah, everyone does that?
That was awesome. It makes me want to read Green Eggs and Ham again.
You know how many times I've gone back and read that book within the past couple months? It's yeah, it never gets old. Okay, we've got one here from Ben. As a government agency, our risk opportunity calculation is very different from that of a profit company. How can we approach this opportunity with our leadership? Well, that is a terrific question. And when it comes to profit companies, it turns out that each one of the industries is also very different from itself. So in one respect, you do have a lot of uniqueness, but that old expression, it's unique just like everybody else. So hence where you go through those opportunities and risks, there are some different regulatory constraints that you have to take into place. We expect in the SLED market that building your own AI is probably not going to be one of the first targets that you tackle. It's going to be something more around like policies and acceptable use. I also think a pertinent discussion when you go to your leadership is to talk about non-adoption. Hey, if we don't do this, what does that mean from the customer experience point of view? So even if other government agencies or other states or other law enforcement don't use AI, think about the average, I don't know, let's say DMV customer or the average legislature member. You're going to be dealing with customers that are used to seeing smart bots and AI when they book a flight, when they get a ride share, when they buy hand cream off of a website. The customer experience is going to change in the world around. And much like, again, the parallel being when the internet came out, we started seeing government agencies have to set up websites, have to do that because their constituents were used to that type of experience. So I think that non-adoption risk is a terrific first opener for speaking with leadership about OpenAI. I'm sorry, my apologies, about generative AI and why that's important and why even though there might be a lot of uncertainty and risk out there, it does need to be addressed in things like policies and training. And there might be turnkey solutions that can be implemented at fairly low risk in-house. So I think that's quite crucial. Okay. Oh, by the way, I love the comment about one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. That is terrific. Do you think there will, this is from Brian, do you think it will ever be an internal based AI lives on our servers and keeps our data to ourselves? That is a beautiful question. So the short answer is yes. Right now, there are open source AI models. Probably the most popular is Hugging Face. There's another one called Mistral that you can download, put on your own equipment, and you can start training it up. Without getting too far in the weeds, there's also an architecture called RAG, which is Retrieval Augmented Generation, that is out there. That's a reference architecture that'll help you put these pieces of the puzzle together without having to go and get your PhD. And it will go ahead and put these together in a very advanced way. There are open source products for something called vector databases that are a part for that. So the answer there is yes, you could do that today. You could bring it in. One of the gotchas, though, is that AI, both on the training side and then on the deployed side, which in AI terms is called inference. So both on training and inference, it has a huge infrastructure toll. So if you are running an AI model, you've probably seen NVIDIA stock go up and through the roof and turn them into a $2 trillion company. That is because the chips that they sell, they're in hot demand. They'll do AI calculations 1,000 times faster than a regular Intel CPU, like maybe you have in your laptop or the servers in your data center. And so companies buying these are running into a problem where these GPUs are sucking so much power, they don't have enough power in the data center. It's measured in kilowatts per square foot. They don't have enough power density to actually build out the models they need. Okay, so you just run into a different problem. What we're seeing today are products like Anthropic. If you're not familiar, go check them out. They have a terrific free demo license you can use, much like ChatGPT. It's a product they've got called Claude. It's free. Like I told you, I'm not selling anything here, right? But go ahead, use Claude. In many respects, it's a little more nuanced than ChatGPT. But the nice thing about it is when you go on the commercial side of Anthropic, or you buy your own license, you get your own sequestered version. Now, it does sit up in the cloud. And the nice thing about that is Anthropic has to worry about power density and what they now call for networking megapipes and specialized ASICs. And also, they take care of all of that. So it isn't sitting on-prem, but it is your sequestered instance of it, which makes it a little bit more than kind of the public swimming pool that we're seeing right now on products like Microsoft Azure. Hopefully that answers the question. Please let me know if I've missed it. Okay.
We've got Carrie has raised her hand, and then we've got a question in the Q&A. So Carrie, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. First and foremost, thanks, Mark. I'm sorry I jumped on a little bit late, so I'll have to catch the recording of the first half of this conversation. But nevertheless, we over in Pickens County, we're in the infancy stages in the sense that we are just about to publish an interim AI policy, as well as some guidelines for our organization. And then we're also going to solicit feedback through our directors and then really surveying staff so that we can take that inventory, as you were speaking of earlier, to figure out what are folks using and how are they using it. And to go back to your point of, there is totally that risk of non-adoption. And I think that we are taking the standpoint, and even our attorneys as well share this same sentiment of, we aren't looking for folks to not utilize these tools because they're there whether we like it or not, but it's how can we keep our organization safe so that our folks know the risks of utilizing these tools. My question goes back to as far as a rollout plan of attack, does that seem reasonable for our organization and maybe other local governments as well? And two, because I had missed the first half of your presentation, what is the tool that you were speaking of that can help us with that inventory and trying to figure out what our folks are currently using?
Sure, sure. So I'll start with the end question first and kind of work my way backwards. And you keep me inside the guardrails on this too. So the products out there are in a family of products called CASB, which is Cloud Access Security Broker, if you're interested in techie acronyms. But there are products like Netscope or Sky High or Zscaler, if those product names ring a bell with you. We're seeing them actually uh, transfer their center of focus from just SaaS services, like say Dropbox or Shutterfly, to transforming their focus from that to generative AI. Why is it that our folks are using a version that's called ChatGPT X? I don't even think that's a real name, and it's hosted in Bulgaria. That might be not a good thing. And so they're transforming that, but it's CASB, CASB, CASB is the space. Kind of moving up to what you were talking about updating policies and kind of talking about non-adoption. That actually, we find, we did some work with a credit union out in California, and the credit unions, this is just part of their industry, are under so much regulatory constraint that when anything new comes along, their risk management group basically is the Department of No. And we worked with their risk management department. Okay, but just saying no doesn't cut it. That's that non-adoption. There has to be a mature approach to this. And again, we started exactly with what you pointed out. We started with use discovery. The first thing they believed that they had to do was, yeah, I know some folks might be using ChatGPT, but I don't think they're using much beyond that. Well, a quick report showed them that they were, at that time, this was probably, I don't know. It was early summer last year. Well, probably about this time last year. So things were still kind of new. They were in the 40 to 50 range of generative AI services that were being used, which was a big shock to them. And so that immediately got this bumped up. Hey, look, this isn't as easy as let's just shut down the firewalls. We're going to be inundated with this. We need to be a little bit mature. That got funding for a project to come in and actually do the assessment, which started with road mapping. Where are we? What do we need to do? Policies and training wound up being one of their first batch of things. So I think you're spot on. I think that's exactly the way to approach it. I think if you walk in and say, hey, we should build our own AI and it's going to schedule, it's going to schedule all of our meetings and take all of our notes, it's going to be like, what are we doing? That's kind of ridiculous. So I think your approach is quite salient. So hopefully I've answered the question. Let me know if I've not. There was a comment in the chat from Carrie about using Grammarly. Yeah, Grammarly now has generative AI built into it, and that's a tool that many of you use. By the way, I'll point out a data point. This is I'm a big believer in leading indicators, and one of the leading indicators I follow quite closely is the business market in Omaha. If someone says, "Oh, did you know in Palo Alto, California, they're doing XYZ?" That's not terribly compelling, for me. That's kind of, if you will, not middle America. That's not the hump of the bell curve. Omaha is. It was last fall I heard of a company in Omaha that made it mandatory that their employees use ChatGPT. Now, when I heard that, I had to get some explanation. What are you guys doing? What's going on with this? And the idea there was, listen, we have so many people that spend a ton of time crafting that perfect email. We want everyone to have a ChatGPT account so that they can, again, with proper training and using the guardrails of no proprietary data, have someone do that for them. And anyway, they saw immediate productivity increase in the group that they POC'd that with, and then they rolled that out company-wide. So I do think that by tackling this head on, even if you are in a kind of a conservative industry and maybe a conservative region, I do think that there are ways. And again, the goal here isn't, hey, we need to force everyone to do AI. That's not the goal. The goal is, again, we need to mitigate some risk here. And then we need to take after mitigating the risk, we need to go ahead and take a look at opportunities that we could exploit. So there's a lot there. Got it. Okay.
All right, Daniel's got a question in the Q&A. It seems like a race to develop internal regulations to protect our AI and from AI. At the same time, as you mentioned, regulation and assurances are coming that will show levels of compliance. Do you have any advice moving forward while these independent races for establishing risk mitigation are ongoing?
Yeah, what I'm going to skip ahead a few slides. By the way, this isn't in the presentation. I always put this in my back pocket in case someone asks about it. So my apologies here to skip through. There are a number of frameworks out there that are attempting to put together best practices. They're all kind of aimed at a different area. But if you were to take a look at some of these, I can share these with you guys in email after the fact. But there are standards out there that are being looked at. IEEE, for instance, talks about new use cases that are popping up and what the impact of those are. MITRE, for you folks that deal with MITRE, they actually have one nice little acronym, spells the word Atlas. They've got a framework that they're putting in. And then NIST is probably the most applicable to that point, which is NIST has an AI risk management framework. Again, the paint's not quite dry on these. OWASP, we understand, released another one. I believe it was this week, might have been last week. So there's a new one out there, but you get the idea that these, they're not exactly regulatory bodies right here, but these frameworks are starting to form. The regulatory groups are watching this quite closely. And by the way, the EU has kicked out their first AI regulation. It's kind of vague in some areas, but hey, it's a 1.0. So I do believe that we'll see, certainly at the state level here, I don't know why, but in the US, we tend not to do things nationally until a bunch of states have done it. And so you'll probably see some states enacting some sort of AI initiative. Long-term, we're hoping, like the privacy space, we had California jump in with their privacy policy. We've seen other states start to join, but even on that, we haven't even hit the national level. So the US might be a laggard in that from a regulatory point of view, but it is coming. So hopefully that kind of addresses where do you go and how do you start with this? Got it. Well, pardon my clicking there. We do have a question from Dave. What is the bar to entry? Thinking dollars as well as human hours, technical capabilities in building and training an AI tool for internal organization use. At what point might it make sense to use a service, AI as a service, to take that on rather than developing it internally? Absolutely the case. We are starting to see, let me back up a step. There was a product that came out called AutoML that was an AI product to build AI. So we've seen products like that come out. We've seen that just jump light years ahead. There are now products out there where, much like with ChatGPT, where you give it a prompt and it gives you an answer, you can say, build me a model that would calculate the density of bass fish on 11 Mile Reservoir. By the way, I sorely need that application. But you could give it that and it may say, oh, well, you know what? That's this type of model. It'll probably be about this big. I think the training data could come from here, and it would start piecing this together for you. So the concept of that AI as a service, there are some fledgling products out there. If you go to GitHub, GitHub also has a bunch of co-pilots that will write the code for specific areas. So if you also needed a very specific type thing to your application, you could even go to GitHub and use Copilot to actually build that for you if you couldn't find it existing. Okay. Let me see here. How are we doing on time? We got about 5 minutes. So let's grab another one here. We got Callie out here. For a small district with less than 5 employees, what app would you recommend that is the safest for our employees to use? Again, not a salesperson here, but Glean is kind of nice because you can start using it with a credit card. And that is kind of, it's not hosted on your site, it's hosted in the cloud on their site, which for some companies, that's a big no-no. For other ones, especially if you have 5 employees, that's a gift. Awesome. I don't have to install anything. I just swipe a credit card and then it's based off users. So maybe you start rather small. Now, again, Glean right now, we're seeing it used mostly for internal use, things like an enterprise search engine, or where you ask it a question, it gives you an answer. So we are seeing that being used. Again, if you want something to be, let's say, customer public facing, that might be a little bit more of a challenge. Not that Glean couldn't do it. It's just you're going to have to open up a lot of data for it to produce useful things for your constituents. And when you're doing that, you're also incurring risk. And so certainly for internal, if it accidentally showed Sharon's pay stub from last month, if something got screwed up in the permissions, it's not like that's going to topple your company, hopefully. But certainly if you did that out with the public, who knows what the blast radius of that could be. So products like Glean, there are other products out there. I mentioned Claude. It is an enterprise version of, by the way, Claude is by a company called Anthropic. Anthropic was founded by 3 founders of OpenAI that had a different vision of where the product needed to be. OpenAI wanted to go consumer. Anthropic wanted to go enterprise, which was going to take a lot longer and be harder, but it would have some security features built into it. So certainly if you're using this in the commercial side, I would recommend Anthropic over OpenAI. But again, that's my opinion. That's not a scientific study. If you're using, Azure with OpenAI, knock yourself out. Keep doing it. It's a great product. So hopefully that answered that question, Callie. Question, thinking dollars and human hours are decreasing because of AI. That absolutely is the case. As a developer, keep it internal and give your people a chance to build some tools. Yeah, and there's some great platforms on the developer side. We are seeing kind of this groundswell of disruption. We're starting to hear from universities about coding not being a required skill for computer scientists. Now, back in the 1840s when I went to college, that would be heresy, right? That's like, what are you talking about? That's not a thing. Coding is the core of all techie pursuits. We're now kind of seeing it going the way of cursive writing. You could do it. It is interesting. Probably it's handy to have a couple people on the planet that can do it, but it's not a skill that developers should be focusing on. They should be focusing more on security, scalability, performance, security. There are other aspects of software. What back in the day we used to call non-functional requirements because they all end with the word ility. So usability, trainability, maintainability, scalability. Those things are really a higher value pursuit of developers. But you're absolutely right. AI is the 4 products I used to mention. There was another one in there called Cursor. Cursor is a development tool that not only will not only develop code for you, but it'll analyze your existing code. Think about the mainframe down in the basement still running COBOL, and we'll explain to you what the code is doing. You may also ask it, are there any known bugs in this code? Are there any performance bottlenecks? And Cursor is very good at that. So what we used to do in the analysis phase of software development is also being AI-ified, if that's a word. Oh, here we go. I know hallucinations can be a concern. And earlier, the temperature was mentioned. How can we alleviate some of these concerns with leadership? Hallucinations are definitely a big concern. For those paying keen attention, you'll remember I mentioned something called RAG architecture. RAG architecture takes LLM, like Anthropic or OpenAI, and it teams it up with this thing called a vector database, which allows you to put more current contextual information. Remember we said that ChatGPT 4 Turbo was trained up through April of 2023. Well, what about everything after that? What about the Nuggets winning the NBA championship? I mean, that's pretty darn important. That needs to be in there. Well, that can be put into a database such that when the LLM doesn't have an answer for it and it's contextually important, that can be brought in. We've seen hallucinations. By the way, for those that aren't familiar, hallucinations are when the LLM just makes something up. So if you ask the LLM who's going to win the Super Bowl next year, it would make something up and say the LA Raiders, because that's totally fictitious. But it would just make something up. But it sounds real. It looks real. It smells real. Vector databases are quite good at nuancing the data to reduce hallucination. I think we're coming up on time.
We are, but Kelly has a couple questions if anyone
Yeah.
wants to stay on a little later. She asked, for a small special district with less than 5 employees, what app would you recommend that is the safest for those employees to use?
Got it. I certainly would recommend turnkey products like Glean, because you don't have to host them. Certainly on the enterprise, in the LLM space, the enterprise versions like Anthropic, I would recommend looking at those. They've got a entry level that is free. Were you to scale up, it's charged by users, and so it should be fairly inexpensive. But those types of products would be where I would start looking.
And then if you use Grammarly for editing sentences structure through email, does Grammarly then have access to your personal info, or is it just the content that you write?
Yeah, it wouldn't be your personal info. It would be any of the data that you hand to Grammarly and ask it to analyze. And by the way, every company is different. There are some companies that very explicitly say, and we dump that data as soon as the window closes. There are some that are very explicit about this isn't being used in a future version. So again, you'd have to check with Grammarly's user agreement as to what that is. But yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, we've reached the end of our questions and we've certainly reached time. Thank you, Mark, for an amazing presentation. This was fabulous. So please don't hesitate to contact any of us if any of you have any follow-up questions or you want to learn more, you want to get a quote, whatever it is, we're here to help you. Make sure you go to sipa.colorado.gov to register for next week's webinar on the 15th. It's going to be an introduction and overview of SIPA's new Gov Grants program that we hope you will consider applying for, which is currently open along with our accessibility grant and our micro grant. The micro grant closes May 31st, so make sure you get those in soon. To find other services that we can help you procure, or to register for our in-person regional workshop that is happening tomorrow. If you're in the area of Johnstown, you're welcome to join us. It's going to be on AI and cybersecurity, and we're going to have basically a hands-on workshop, and you're going to walk away with some materials and some action plans. We hope that it'll be useful for you. We've got our upcoming 12th annual user conference happening on September 23rd, so you can go ahead and register for that. It's going to be fabulous. We're going to be at Coors Field this year, so very exciting. Subscribe to our monthly newsletter for any news, events, and updates that you need. And you know how to find us if you need to reach us. We will be getting this webinar up on our YouTube channel if you want to share it with anyone else or watch it again or catch anything that you missed. And please do remember to fill out that survey at the end to help us make these more valuable for you, as we have future ones coming up, hopefully in August or September, and then one in October with OGX. Thank you all again for joining us. We are really glad you spent your time, and we hope you have a wonderful day.